Hello everyone, my name is Betty, and today I decided to share with you an important, albeit rather painful chapter from my life. A chapter full of difficulties, internal struggles, misunderstandings, criticism, and the quiet pain that accumulates in your heart when the people closest to you, those from whom you expect support, they turn into a source of doubt and reproach. Perhaps some of you are familiar with this feeling of being underestimated, misunderstood, or, even more difficult, rejected. I thought it was worth telling my story, at least for the sake of those who also went through a storm of divorces, family conflicts, and those moments when you lose not only the person you've lived with for years, but also part of your identity. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. It all started with a man I met at the age of 20, Kevin. I was a student at the university at the time, full of dreams, hopes, and naive faith in love, which, as it seemed to me at the time, could overcome any obstacles. We found each other through a dating app, and from the very first time we talked, I felt something deeply human, vulnerable, and real in Kevin. He was 26, he was working, he was already more or less settled in life, and despite the fact that there was a noticeable difference in age and lifestyle between us, a spark broke out between us, a real, genuine one. I have always believed that love is not measured by numbers in a passport. It does not depend on appearance or social status. For me, age was, in fact, just a number, which in no case should determine who you can love and who you can't. Kevin, on the other hand, was initially very sensitive to this difference. He repeatedly raised this issue, asking me with concern in his voice, "Betty, why are you with me? Don't you want to be with someone closer to your age? Who will be your equal? Who, perhaps, will be a better match for you in interests and spirit?" He couldn't believe that I really chose him, not out of pity, not out of need, but simply because I loved him. He kept looking for ulterior motives where there were none. His insecurity manifested itself in small things, in minor comments, which eventually began to form a blank wall between us. "You couldn't just choose me," he once said, "I'm not like the others. For a girl like you, Betty, I'm just a strange choice." He asked me to tell him the real reason why I was with him, and my words, my sincerity, could not penetrate his inner armor of doubt. I had to assure him over and over again that I didn't need peers, that I wasn't looking for someone suitable in terms of parameters. I loved him, his intelligence, his humor, his kindness, even if he hid it behind a wall of sarcasm. But despite all my attempts, Kevin's insecurities continued to poison our relationship like a slow-acting poison. At times, it seemed to me that he wasn't even so much doubting me as fighting his own demons, which had long since settled in his mind. I tried to prove my loyalty to him with deeds. I lived very modestly, because I was a student, and my finances did not allow me to indulge in luxury. I paid for the dorm myself, worked part-time in the evenings, and tried not to allow myself too much, so as not to depend on him. I bought gifts for him not by price, but by meaning, trying to choose something that would say, "I see you, I think of you." Sometimes it was a hand-knitted sweater, sometimes a ticket to a concert by his favorite band, but I always did it with my heart. Kevin seemed to appreciate these little things, but his doubts didn't go away. He kept asking questions about why I was with him, and it was getting more and more painful for me that my efforts were not bringing relief. It took me almost 3 years to realize that it wasn't about me at all. When I finally met his parents, Samuel and Charlotte, everything fell into place. His father, Samuel, had a real stroke of luck. He won the lottery. And not some modest sum, but a really big jackpot that turned their whole lives upside down. Since then, Kevin's family had lived in a large, carefully furnished house with a well-tended garden and a swimming pool, where everything from the gold frames on the walls to the expensive wood furniture said, "We have money." They didn't just live well, they lived with the knowledge that their success was unique, exceptional, and almost fateful. Samuel spoke about it with such a triumphant tone, as if the universe itself had rewarded him for some special merit. "You know, not everyone can win like me," he said with a grin over dinner, "it's rare. But I got lucky on the first try. I just always knew how to make the right decisions." And at the same time, he did not forget to add, "Some, of course, study for years and get diplomas, but all this will not replace intuition and work. In this house, everything was imbued with a light but palpable disregard for those who went the other way, whether it was hard work or just a modest life without a successful lottery ticket. Charlotte, his mother, was stricter, less eloquent, but much more prickly. She kept hinting that Kevin's past girlfriends were with him solely for the money, and disappeared as soon as the opportunity arose. Her words sounded like innocent remarks, but there was poison hidden in them. Some girls only see a bank account, especially if the guy doesn't look like a prince. I could feel her studying me intently, as if trying to find signs of lies, self-interest, falsehood. And the worst part was that she told Kevin quite openly that he was too naive, too prone to making mistakes in choosing people. She did not believe that he was capable of making sound decisions, and this shadow of distrust fell on me. It seemed that in the eyes of Kevin's parents, any woman who dared to fall in love with their son automatically fell into the same category. The stigma of a money hunter became a kind of calling card that could not be discussed or revised. It wasn't said directly, but it was felt in every glance from Charlotte, in every remark from Samuel at dinner, in every pointedly innocent remark about how all women are nice at first, and then disappear as soon as they realize that they don't appear in the will. Over time, under the weight of these suspicions, Kevin, as if losing the ability to think for himself, began to believe in this picture of the world in which all women are treacherous actresses, carefully acting out the spectacle of love in order to snatch a piece from someone else's wealth. And so, for no particular reason, I suddenly found myself among such characters in their story, as if someone had thrown me into someone else's play, where someone had already written my role in advance. At first, I tried to pretend that I didn't hear. That it was an accident. That they're just too careful. But everything happened over and over again, like a broken record. Gradually, even the semblance of politeness disappeared in their voices. The hints became rougher and more direct, and one day I just couldn't keep quiet anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of anger rise in my chest, and said, looking directly at them, "I'm sorry, but I can't agree with you. Kevin is a hard-working and intelligent man. He is not just your son, he is an independent person who is building his career, even if not according to the patterns that you have drawn for him, but in his own way. And he will definitely achieve something." There was silence for a moment, but Samuel, not used to being contradicted, chuckled and said, "It's wonderful, of course, but that doesn't change the fact that girls want him just because of our wealth. Yes, the money is ours, we know that. But Kevin is a co-owner of the house. This house will be his sooner or later. You know, Betty, as soon as these girls see our house, the one for $350,000, they don't see anything else, just dollars in their eyes." I felt a rush of heat, not from embarrassment, but from rage. It seemed to me that I was being reduced to an empty set of intentions, as if I were a statistic in some kind of financial report. I tried to keep my voice calm, even though my voice was shaking. I can't be responsible for those who came before me, but I know one thing for sure, I'm not here for the money. I love your son, not your house, not your wealth, and not your memories of the lottery ticket. At that moment, I was expecting that at least someone, if not Samuel, then Charlotte, would at least try to understand me, soften up, say something human. But instead, she tilted her head to the side, smiled, and said, "Don't worry, Betty. You know, it can be hard to accept that someone can be successful and live in a house like this. You live in a small rented apartment with roommates. And after a few evenings here, it's only natural to start wishing for something like that. This is normal." These words, laced with pseudo-compassion, insinuating sarcasm and arrogant charity, were the last straw. It was as if something had snapped inside me. I sat with my fists clenched under the table to keep from shaking, and I felt tears rolling into my eyes, not even from resentment, but from impotence. I am powerless to change something, to convince them, to make them see in me not a scheme, not a template, not a stereotype, but a living person. And Kevin. He had heard it all. He was sitting next to me, in the same chair, in the same room, and he heard his mother condescendingly destroying my dignity, and his father belittling my love, and he didn't say a word. Not a single one. When we returned home, there was silence in the car, tense and oppressive. I looked out the window, saw how the lanterns flowed into long strips, and tried to find the words so as not to explode, so as not to lose the little that, as it seemed to me, still connected us. But I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Kevin, your parents were unfair, not only to me, but to you as well. Why didn't you stand up for us? I asked, barely able to contain my emotions. He sighed, his shoulders slumped, and there was a tired disappointment in his voice. What did you want, Betty? You know what I've been through. People used to use me, or rather, not me, but what I imagined, access to money, to the future, to a house, to a car. They made plans for how we would get married and how they would live in the house that I would eventually get. Even if they were wrong, it doesn't mean that my parents are wrong about everything else now. Those words pierced me like needles. I stared at him, not believing that he was saying it out loud. Even if it was other women before, other situations, how can you think that I'm the same? Can't you see how painful it was for me to hear all this, and you didn't say anything? I just sat there and listened to them accuse me of something I didn't do. I spoke quickly, as if trying to get this resentment out of me before it poisoned me to the end. Kevin looked confused. You know, Betty, my family is rich now, and maybe they're really right. I'm not blaming you, honestly. I don't think you're pursuing bad goals. But understand, this may look suspicious from the outside. You don't have parents, you live alone, and you're in a more vulnerable position. It all looks, like you're depending on what I can offer you. He didn't even notice how he was destroying me with his words. Just because I don't have parents doesn't make me an inheritance hunter, Kevin. It just makes me a less fortunate person in my life. I never asked you to spend money on me. I've never imposed any obligations on you. How can you even assume that I stopped because I couldn't finish this thought. He didn't argue. He wasn't comforting. He just said, I love you. Isn't that enough? Let's not argue about this anymore. He turned to the window, as if putting an end to a conversation in which I had not been heard. And although his confession might have been a comfort to some, to me it sounded like a belated evasion of the answer, like an attempt to cover up the real problem with a three-syllable phrase. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that deep down Kevin still doubted my intentions, despite everything we'd lived together, despite the years of love, dedication, and sacrifice I'd made for our common future. I tried to raise this issue gently, with love, offering an open conversation over and over again, and even once suggested that we go to therapy together. I thought maybe a professional would help him look at the situation more clearly, without the prism of his family fears and past experiences. But Kevin always waved me off, assuring me that everything was fine, that he was just tired, or he didn't see the point, and with each refusal, I felt like an invisible wall was growing between us, which I was trying to destroy with my own efforts alone. Over time, I became more and more estranged from his family, not because I wanted to destroy the bond between my son and his parents, but because I could no longer stand the air I had to breathe in their house, this poisonous atmosphere of distrust, sarcasm, hidden hostility, in which I had to be a guest, but never part of it. We got engaged shortly after I graduated from college, and I was just starting my career at the time, and I was happy that I had found a good job with a decent salary that allowed me not just to survive, but to build my own, albeit modest, future. I started saving money for our wedding, and we agreed to split the costs equally, and we did, because it was fundamental to me. I wanted our union to begin on an equal footing. I was 23 when we got married, and I naively, with an open heart, believed that marriage was a new chapter in which everything would be different, simpler, and calmer. But the next 4 years were a real challenge. Kevin, despite the fact that he now had his own family, continued to visit his parents regularly, and each time he returned, he seemed to be different, more tense, distant, with some kind of clouded sadness in his eyes, which he did not know how, or perhaps did not want to explain. I knew it was all coming from Samuel and Charlotte. I knew they kept whispering their poisonous thoughts to him, as if sowing doubt in his head drop by drop. I asked Kevin to cut down on communication with them. I didn't forbid it. No, I just asked him to choose us at least sometimes, and not the old family attitudes that were slowly but surely destroying his confidence in our love. But he couldn't, or wouldn't, hear me. And with every month, with every new visit to my parents, I saw those shadows creeping closer again. He began to ask questions with a cautious intonation, to doubt, to delve into what I said or did, to look for hidden meaning in my actions that was not there. He no longer saw me the way I was, only through the lens of what Samuel and Charlotte told him, that no one can really love him, that even after all these years, I'm still pursuing some hidden benefit. This feeling of constant verification, the need to prove my sincerity every day, every morning, every minute, became an increasingly heavy burden that I could hardly carry. The real test for us came on Kevin's birthday. We decided not to have a lavish celebration, preferring a modest celebration at home, with cake, candles and soft music, as he liked. I wanted him to feel that he was important, that we loved him, and I gave him a watch that he had been secretly looking at in the window for a long time, but did not dare to buy. Beautiful, elegant, not too flashy, but with taste. His face lit up with joy, real, childish, and for a moment I believed that everything could still be returned, while he clutched the box to his chest and said, "You have no idea how much I wanted them." "Thank you, Betty." But then, full of enthusiasm, he suddenly said, "We need to go to my parents and show them. They're just going to be stunned." I admit, I hesitated because I knew how these meetings could turn out, but I didn't want to spoil his day, so I just nodded and we drove off. As soon as we entered, he happily rushed to his parents. "Mom, Dad, look at this watch." Betty gave them to me. "They're gorgeous, aren't they? I've wanted them for so long." His eyes were shining, his voice was ringing with happiness, but as soon as he stopped talking, Charlotte answered, with the same shade in her voice that I already knew well, "Well, Kevin, it looks like she loves you after all." We were a little worried. And then Samuel, as if not wanting to miss the moment, added with that rude confidence of his, "Don't be fooled, old Charlotte. She's a money hunter. She married him because we have, a $350,000 house. Let's not turn a blind eye to the obvious." I just froze. It took her a moment to find the voice to respond. My disappointment was so complete that I was talking not only with resentment, but with fatigue. "Why do you think I married your son because of the house? I have been working for many years and I rent a place myself. And if we're talking about age, why would I marry an older man if I didn't love him? I assure you, I did not marry Kevin for your money, not for the house. I married him because I love him. He is my husband, and I chose him with my heart." I shifted my gaze to Kevin, hoping that he would confirm my words, stand next to me, say at least something that would give me strength. But Kevin was silent. He was staring at the floor, avoiding my gaze, not moving, not saying a word, as if he was paralyzed, as if the truth in my words was not obvious to him. I felt loneliness slowly overwhelm me, as if I suddenly found myself on stage alone, under the spotlight, and the whole audience, including my husband, refused to admit that I was a person and not a shadow. I had to go on the offensive myself. "Kevin, why don't you say anything? Your parents have been calling me a money hunter for years. How can they ever see the real me if you don't talk yourself? Why are you silent? Tell them they're wrong." Kevin's hesitation was so obvious that it seemed as if the very space around us had shrunk with tension. He hesitated like a child caught off guard at the moment when it was necessary to choose a side, and finally muttered, I do not know what you want me to say, Betty. Maybe my parents are not so wrong." His voice faltered and he stopped, but even the unfinished sentence sounded like a sentence. This subtle, but so heavy hint, this maybe, fell on me like an icy shower, because in these words, in this uncertainty, there was not just confusion, it was doubt about the very foundation of our connection. His inability to say firmly, without hesitation, "They're wrong, I know you love me," meant much more than he probably realized himself. It wasn't just a weakness. It was a deep crack in the very heart of our marriage that suddenly became visible, like a crack in glass when the sun hits it. The irony is that all this was happening on a holiday that was supposed to be his day, his joy. Instead of fun and warm words, there were accusations in the air, from which it was impossible to hide. I looked at him in amazement, and it must have been with a mixture of pain and rage, because he suddenly looked up at me, and there was alarm in his eyes. "Are you serious, Kevin? Do you believe that I married you for money? Because of yours, assets?" My voice was trembling, but there was no longer a request in it, only pain. Kevin's parents were not long in coming. Samuel crossed his arms and, looking at me almost defiantly, added, "You didn't even talk about buying your own place, did you, Betty? For someone who rents an apartment, the desire to own a house should be a priority. And you've never even mentioned it. Why is that?" I didn't say anything, but he continued, "You can't afford our house. And you knew it. You would never have been able to afford that level on your own. So marrying Kevin and staying here is, of course, the logical path." And Charlotte, as if confirming his words, looked at me with a mixture of regret and cold calculation. I turned to Kevin, trying to find some support in his face, but he was looking at me with an expression that strangely combined doubt, embarrassment, and almost confusion. "Yes, Betty," he began, "why would you marry me? Yes, I believe you had feelings, but maybe it was something more than just love." And then, in one short moment, everything I had built, felt, and aspired to crumbled. It wasn't my parents' words that hurt me the most. I was already used to their cold logic. It was him. My husband. My favorite. He was the only one from whom I expected unconditional acceptance, trust, and faith. Now he was also questioning everything that I thought was real. I felt the warmth leaving me, the love receding, the icy disappointment settling in my heart. I was silent. Long. Because at such moments, even breathing feels like a betrayal. And then I just realized, this is the end. I could no longer and did not want to be in a union where my feeling, my heart, was put under a microscope and called calculation. I didn't say anything out loud, just nodded, as if agreeing with something he didn't dare say himself. But inside, I've already made a decision. I'm leaving. I didn't make a scene, I didn't argue, I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I waited until we got home, and while he took a shower, I sat down in another room, opened my laptop and wrote a message to the lawyer I found a year ago, in the midst of another crisis. We discussed the details, and he assured me that the documents would be ready within a week. I moved to another room, explaining that I needed some space. Kevin may have thought that I was just offended or cooled down, as he used to say, and was probably confident that it would pass. But nothing went through. A week later, when all the paperwork was ready, I packed my things, carefully, without making too much noise, and left. I even left the keys on his bedside table. Kevin called me an hour later. His voice was shaking, and it was clear he was in a panic. I told him to meet me at one place and to make sure to take his parents with him. He didn't understand why, but he agreed. And so, an hour later, I stood on the porch of a house that no one could pass by without slowing down and gasping at its splendor. When they arrived, the three of them got out of the car in complete silence. Their faces were tense and worried, but when they saw where we were, they also looked surprised. "You must be wondering why I brought you here," I said, trying to sound firm. I turned around and pointed at the house behind me. "It's a beautiful house, isn't it? Much more beautiful than yours. It's worth over $3 million in the current market. Impressive, isn't it?" I glanced at Charlotte, at Samuel, and even at Kevin, whose face had paled. I led them inside, through a wide hallway with marble floors, past exquisite chandeliers and furniture, every detail of which was probably worth more than my old apartment. I said, nodding at the paintings on the walls, the antique piano in the corner of the living room, and the massive mahogany dining table. All of this was supposed to say what I've been trying to convey with words all these years, that I wasn't after anyone's house, no one's money, no one's inheritance. I wanted them to see how wrong they were. "What is this place?" Charlotte finally asked, and there was something in her voice that I had never heard before, confusion. "Betty, Charlotte's voice sounded uncertain, almost a whisper. "I just don't understand why you have access to a house like this. Where did you get it from? It's a luxury. Even for some of us." Kevin frowned, looked from me to his parents and back again, then took a step closer, looking around anxiously. "Why don't we all just go inside to have a quiet conversation? We can't stand here on the porch and interrogate." I don't understand what's going on here." I felt everything inside me tighten with tension, but I was no longer the kind of woman who silently swallows resentments. I was ready to tell everything and dot the I's. So I nodded and opened the doors for them, gesturing for them to enter the house, not paying attention to how their faces were again and again they were distorted by amazement. They followed, unable to hide the awe that swept over them at the sight of the luxurious interior, 2-story ceilings with moldings, antique mirrors in gilt frames, a marble fireplace with fine carvings, light flooding the space through huge arched windows, upholstered furniture, which seemed to be afraid to sit down to don't mess up the immaculate order. Everything here screamed of wealth, but without arrogance. In every detail there was a delicacy of taste, inherited, not bought. We walked into the living room in silence, sat down in deep armchairs, and I held my breath for a moment, resolutely spread out a folder with papers on the coffee table. "I've made a decision," I began, and my voice sounded flat, as if it belonged not to me, but to a woman who had been through this inside for a long time. "That's why we're here. I filed for divorce. These documents are a formality that we can complete quickly, without unnecessary pain. It will be an uncontested divorce if you agree, Kevin. Everything is done, it remains only to sign." I looked at him, but he spoke first, his face confused, his voice full of incomprehension and anxiety. "Are you filing for divorce? Seriously? Because of all this?" He waved his hand as if he wanted to scatter what was happening like dust. "It's simple," I interrupted, trying not to let my emotions get out. "You and your parents think I'm a money hunter. You believe that I married you solely for the sake of the house, for the sake of your supposed inheritance. I've been trying to prove the opposite for years, telling you that I love you, that I don't see a purse in you, but you refuse to listen. I'm tired. I don't want to make excuses anymore. If you think I'm here for convenience, then it might be better if I leave. I will rid you all of this threat." "This is ridiculous," Kevin interrupted, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Do you seriously want to end all this just because my parents expressed an opinion that they believe to be true? They're just protecting me, you know." "No, Kevin. I think it's the right thing to do," I said firmly. "Because you sided with them. Because you believed it yourself." Charlotte, who had been silent until then, leaned forward and, looking at her son with an expression in which remorse and realization might finally have been mixed, said, "If she's really so adamant, sign the papers, Kevin. Then maybe you'll find someone who truly loves you. Without all these complications. So why did you bring us to this house, Betty?" Kevin's voice became prickly and suspicious again. "Do you want me to buy it for you as part of the agreement? Are you hoping to get something from us in exchange for a divorce?" I laughed, though it was joyless, almost bitter. "Why on earth would I want you to buy this house, Kevin?" I stood up and looked him straight in the eye. "This house is already mine." The silence that hung in the room seemed almost physically palpable. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me with such an expression, as if I said that I fly into space on weekends. Disbelief turned to growing confusion, almost alarm. "Wait," Samuel leaned forward, his voice harsh. "How the hell can you afford a house like this? You've been renting an apartment all the time, working as an ordinary office employee. None of your salaries can afford such housing. It's unreal. You're lying." I looked at him calmly, feeling not anger rise in me, but cold determination. "I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth, even if you're not ready to hear it. Kevin, you must remember how I once mentioned my parents. That I was left without them in my youth. Then I casually said that they had an inheritance. This house is part of it. He's in a trust now, but according to the terms, I'll officially take over when I turn 31. And while I'm living here, I'm managing as a temporary holder. I don't have to work hard because I have a trust fund waiting for me." "That's impossible," Kevin muttered, and there was something between pain and fear in his voice. "Your parents died a long time ago. Why didn't they give you the house earlier?" I sighed, because I knew that this question would definitely come up. "Because they were smarter than you, Kevin. Because they understood that I needed to grow up on my own before I could get all this. Because they knew that wealth is not given to someone who does not know how to appreciate love. You see," I began, looking directly at Kevin, trying to keep calm, My parents realized during their lifetime that not all people in this world would see me as a person. Some will only see the possibilities. Potential leeches, as they called it, could stick to me under the guise of love, friendship, partnership, and that's why they strictly insisted that I never tell anyone about the house, the trust fund, or my future inheritance. Call it intuition, premonition, or the wisdom of the years, but they foresaw that one day someone might try to use me. Therefore, everything was designed so that I could access it only when I turned 31, when, in their opinion, I would be mature enough to recognize who was with me out of love and who was with me out of calculation. And I hoped that by that time I would have someone next to me who cares about me, not about my square feet and bank balance, but about me as a woman, as a soul, as a partner. "Oh my God, Betty," Charlotte gasped, her voice suddenly losing the confident sharpness with which she always pronounced my name and actions. "You should have told us. We didn't know. None of us could have imagined that you had such a house. We could all," she hesitated, "live very comfortably here if you would just share it." "Yes, you should have told us," Samuel interjected, quickly picking up on his wife's thought, "then we wouldn't have thought that you were after our house. We just didn't know. All this misunderstanding could have been avoided if you had said it right away." "I've always said," Kevin said, and there was a strange mixture of relief and awkwardness in his voice, "I always knew you were special, Betty. That you're right for me. I just couldn't prove it before. Look at how you live. Look at this house. You have everything. You're incredible. I'm proud that you're my wife." "Kevin's found a great match," Samuel added, suddenly almost proud. "Smart, beautiful, and well off. That's what I understand, a successful union." I couldn't help but laugh, dry, joyless, filled with bitterness. Their words, their radical change in attitude towards me, was so fast, so overwhelming, that for a moment I even felt physically sick. A minute ago, I was nothing more to them than a homeless student dreaming of snatching a piece of their property. And now, all of a sudden, I'm a great couple, a wonderful woman, a real find. But perhaps the most striking thing was how deftly and swiftly they forgot about the very documents that I put in front of them, about the divorce application, about my decision, about the wounds that they inflicted. "Don't worry," I said, taking the papers back out and showing them the page with my signature. "I haven't forgotten. As promised, my documents are ready. I signed everything. This is an application for an uncontested divorce. You can just sign here, Kevin, and we'll part amicably. If you want to fight, we can go to court. But I'm not coming back. I'm not going to live with you anymore. And not because I'm angry, but because I'm tired." "Wait, Betty," Kevin intervened in a panic, his voice trembling. "Things are different now. You've already proved that you're not a money hunter. It was a misunderstanding. We even apologized. We admitted that we were wrong. Isn't that enough?" "Yes, Samuel's right," Charlotte echoed, and there was something like regret on her face. "We're really sorry, Betty. We doubted you for nothing. We allowed ourselves to be biased. You don't deserve this." But despite their words, despite their attempts to replay everything, something inside me was already completely destroyed. Their regrets were late, like a lifeline thrown when a person had already climbed ashore by himself. Their new compliments and attempts to start from scratch could not erase the clarity that has pierced me in recent days. Their distrust, these heavy accusations, the cold shadow of suspicion that fell on my name, all this could not be erased. "I don't need your apologies," I said, not raising my voice, but every word was as sharp as a blade. "Especially if they are dictated not by remorse, but by awareness of my financial viability. 3 years, Kevin. For 3 whole years, you allowed your parents to openly humiliate me, call me a money hunter, and looked away when they hurled insults. You knew how much it hurt, but instead of standing next to me and saying, 'She's my wife,' you chose silence. Moreover, you began to doubt yourself. To blame. He assumed that I married you not out of love, but out of greed. This is not just a mistake. It's a lack of respect. I can't be with a man who doesn't respect his wife. That's enough for me. That's it. Kevin froze. He looked at me as if for the first time he really heard what I was saying, but it was too late. Charlotte and Samuel, realizing that I wasn't going to change their minds, suddenly changed their tone. Their faces were contorted with anxiety, and their voices were filled with sincere pleading. They reached out to me with desperation, as if it really was all just a misunderstanding. "Betty, please, forget all this," Charlotte begged. "It was just a mistake. We'll fix everything. Give us a chance. Everything can be fixed." But I saw no remorse in their eyes. Only fear. The fear of losing a daughter-in-law with a $3 million house. The fear of losing access to what they suddenly considered their own. Their complaints, their attempts to replay the past did not touch me. All I could feel at that moment was a cold certainty and a dull rage that after all that had happened, they continued to consider me naive. "Go away," I said softly but firmly. "All three of them. Get out before I call the police." My firm, unshakable position, expressed in a single, clear and peremptory demand to leave my house, made it so clear to them that the theater was over that no one had any desire to argue or challenge my choice. They silently, with their heads down, one by one went out the door, which I then closed behind me. They came with a sense of relief, with such an inner exhalation, as if for the first time in many years they had breathed in truly freely. And yet, as much as I would have liked it to end there, the story, alas, did not end with the slamming of the front door. In the following weeks, Kevin and his parents began to literally harass me. First there were messages, tearful calls in which they changed masks from penitent to manipulative, from pleading to threats. Then there were hints of gifts, suggestions to arrange everything beautifully, leave the past behind, and talk like adults. They confidently continued to act based on their old and convenient logic. If you can't be influenced by words, then you can certainly be influenced by money. Every new letter they sent, every attempt to make me happy at the expense of financial gain, caused me only cold rage, as if they didn't understand anything at all, as if they still saw only one problem behind the whole story, in which I was trampled by their distrust: how to regain control. The irony, however, was that now that Kevin was officially listed as a co-owner of the house with his parents, I was legally entitled to half of his share as a spouse filing for divorce. Obviously, someone explained this detail to them, because since then their zeal for reconciliation has become almost comical. But I didn't give in. I wasn't going to trade my freedom, go back into the trap, just so that someone would have a good night. I moved all my belongings to my parents' house, the very house to which I already had legally justified access as the future owner, and where, for the first time in many years, I felt that I was on land that belonged to me, and only to me. Meanwhile, Kevin and his parents did not stop trying to break into my life. They called from unfamiliar numbers, sent letters with offers to meet and discuss everything like adults, and even once I saw Kevin standing at the gate of my new house, hoping that maybe I would change my mind. I had to change my phone number, restrict my social media contacts, and after he tried to catch me at work, I alerted security and he was politely but firmly escorted outside the office. Despite all these attempts, he still refused to sign the divorce papers, as if clinging to a vague hope that time would fix everything. But time, as you know, does not fix anything if a person does not fix it. Almost a year has passed, and the divorce process is still pending, and this is not because I doubt it, but because his inability to accept the truth, which he himself once destroyed, prevents him from letting go. Nevertheless, I have learned to live with this uncertainty, not allowing it to control me. I'm doing fine. Moreover, I feel happy. I've learned to be alone, but not lonely. I found an inner resilience that I didn't even know I had before. Yes, I go on dates from time to time, and sometimes I even catch myself thinking that I could fall in love again, but I'm no longer looking for a man for shelter, support, or the answer to the question, am I good enough? I know now that I am sufficient on my own. Recently, my cousin, who, as it turned out, still has a connection with Kevin's family, told me that now their main concern is not the loss of a relationship, but possible payments. According to the law, Kevin, if the divorce is declared uncontested, may have to give me the legal share of his part of the house, and this, taking into account the legal costs and depleted savings of his family, can greatly affect their position. I wasn't surprised to learn that Kevin is now talking about selling the house himself, and, according to his cousin, blames his parents for the fact that it was their interference that destroyed his marriage, their doubts, their fears, and their arrogance. Well, maybe he was finally beginning to understand. But it doesn't concern me anymore. I don't feel any anger, no revenge, no desire to see how they will get out. I just don't care. Their dilemmas, fears, and losing games are no longer my story. My story is about freedom. This is the house in which I live alone, with windows from which I see not the past, but a bright, albeit unknown future. These are solitary evenings with a book, silence, and a cup of good tea. This is my new chapter, in which there is no place for people who demand proof of love, but are not ready to give trust. My only goal now is to free myself completely, to the last word, to the last signature, to the last shadow left of them in my memory, and to leave everything, chaos, pain, doubt, humiliation, behind, forever.